David, in trying to understand the ends and objectives of what theology is, we call it eschatology, the ultimate things. It's my impression that the Eastern Orthodox approach has more of a deification of the human potential than other strands of Christianity. Is that right?
It's certainly central to Eastern Orthodoxy. Technically, doctrinally, it is present in Catholic tradition, but there are no points in the tradition when it was emphasized in the way it is in the East. And yeah, definitely, from a very early period, the classical formulation was that God became a man so that human beings could become God, meaning not that they would merge into the ocean of divinity, but that well, as Second Peter has it, they become partakers of the divine nature. That there's a kind of that what salvation consists in is a marvelous exchange whereby the divine Son takes on human nature, and in him, human beings take on the divine nature.
Now, a lot of people say that divine nature, but when you push it further, they really mean a very diminished kind of divine nature. And can you distinguish? Is in the Orthodox tradition, is that divinity very literal?
Well, yeah. I mean, it would be presumptuous for me to imagine that I know what the eschatological state's really going to be. But it has a mediatorial role in Orthodox tradition. For Maximus the Confessor, my second favorite figure in the tradition, it is a mediation between the divine and created realms that when properly restored, extends into eternity. It means a real partaking in the life, joy, power, glory of God. But it's also, one is always cautioned not to think that one can imagine what that would be like. But it is a real transformation. I mean, it's understood not simply as the possession of a few extra attributes like a superhero, but a real transformation into the divine nature, such that one experiences divine love and glory in an entirely novel way or new way.
If God is outside of time, as you believe and as the tradition holds, does that mean that human beings, if they ascend to that state, will also be not in time, and so that everything will be a sort of an instant beatific vision?
No, I mean, at least in Eastern tradition, and really in Western tradition too, that's strictly denied. Well, first of all, God's not outside of time; He transcends it. Okay. He's as much in it as out of it, you know. But no, it's always one of the differences that remains always between the created and the divine is the creature is dynamic and changing and ever moving forward. And if we cease to change, we cease to exist. We are finite, and we move toward an end.
That's in our current state, but in our transformed state, the
same?
same?
The transformed states, yeah, we're not going to become infinite. We would be then indiscernible from God Himself.
Well, we wouldn't have an infinite past, but we would be immortal.
Well, you're thinking of infinity in terms of duration. I'm talking about infinite nature,
okay.
possessed.
Okay.
Gregory of Nyssa, famously the great, who is my favorite figure in the tradition, incidentally, described that state as epectasis, an everlasting stretching out into greater growth throughout eternity.
So there's change in that.
Oh, yes, and the same is true in Maximus. And arguably so even in the West in, say, Thomas Aquinas, though the imagery used sounds more static at times.
What about the creation itself? We know human beings will be in it, but what about the restoration of the cosmos, non-human life? How comprehensive are we?
That's certainly the language of the Bible and of St. Paul. It's of a restoration. I mean, it's a cosmic transfiguration. It's a cosmic salvation. It's not limited to humans or rational creation, no. And as I mentioned, Maximus, for him, the consummation of salvation is that state where humanity has this everlasting priestly role of a Methorios, one who both part of cosmic creation and a spiritual intellect within the economy of created nature. Very much the case that the language of Scripture is all this worldly. It's not. It's never described in terms of an escape to an impalpable heaven. It's always a restoration, a new heaven, a new earth, a new Jerusalem. And however metaphorical that language is, it's also clear that this is, say in Romans chapter 8, the vision that the early Christians certainly took for granted, that they were looking forward not to an escape from the cosmos, but a salvation of the cosmos in its every dimension, including animal, vegetable, mineral. So, and that is the Eastern Orthodox tradition, much more clearly than at certain junctures in Western tradition.